The midday rush at the corner booth diner was a symphony of chaos, the clatter of cheap ceramic on formica, the sizzle of the grill, and the low hum of a dozen conversations. But for one man sitting in a worn-out vinyl booth, the noise faded into a muffled roar. Aidan Gallagher, a name synonymous with global tech empire Ether. Dynamics saw only one thing his 10-year-old son Leo struggling. A tremor in Leo's hand sent a forkful of mashed potatoes scattering across the table for the third time. The familiar sting of frustration and helplessness tightened Aidan's chest. He was a man who could command boardrooms and shape the future of technology, but he couldn't stop the quiet humiliation his son felt in this greasy spoon diner. Then he saw her. A waitress, her name tag reading Hannah, moved towards them, her expression not one of pity, but of gentle knowing understanding. What she did in the next 60 seconds would shatter Aidan's cynical world and set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The scent of stale coffee and fried onions hung heavy in the air at the corner booth, a place so far removed from Aidan Gallagher's usual world of Michelin-starred restaurants and private chefs that it felt like a different planet. But Leo had insisted. On their rare boys' day out, he'd pointed to the diner's glowing neon sign from the back of Aidan's armored Bentley and said it looked real. For Leo, whose life was a meticulously curated schedule of therapies and private tutors, real was the ultimate adventure. Aidan had agreed, albeit reluctantly. He loathed the stares. He was used to being recognized the target of whispers and covert phone pictures. But the glances they received here were different. They weren't for him, the billionaire, but for Leo. His son, brilliant and sharp, was a prisoner in a body that often betrayed him. Cerebral palsy had affected his motor control, turning simple acts like holding a cup or using a fork into monumental challenges. Today was a bad day. Leo's hands trembled more than usual, a frustrating side effect of a new medication they were trying. Each time he attempted to eat, the fork would clatter against the plate, his face flushing a deeper shade of crimson with every failed attempt. Aidan's heart, an organ he usually kept well guarded, behind a fortress of logic and business acumen, ached with a familiar, powerless throb. He tried to help cutting the chicken into smaller pieces, pushing the food onto the fork himself, but his movements were clumsy clinical. He was a fixer of complex algorithms, not a nurturer. "I can do it, Dad," Leo insisted, his voice thin but stubborn. Aidan leaned back the vinyl of the booth, groaning in protest. He ran a hand over his tired face, the lines of stress etched deeper than usual. His late wife, Catherine, had been the one with the magic touch, the endless patience. Since her death in the car accident that had also worsened Leo's condition 3 years ago, Aidan had felt like he was navigating parenthood with a faulty map. It was then that he saw the waitress, Hannah Reed, watching them from across the room. She wasn't staring with the morbid curiosity of the other patrons. Her gaze was focused, empathetic. She was young, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes that held a surprising warmth. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform was clean, but faded. She moved with an efficiency born of necessity, refilling coffees and clearing plates, but her attention kept drifting back to their table. Aidan tensed, his default suspicion kicking in. He was accustomed to people trying to get close to him, to his money. He braced himself for some syrupy, insincere offer of help, a transparent attempt to catch the eye of Aidan Gallagher. Instead, she approached the table next to theirs, a family with 2 boisterous kids. She took their order with a smile, then turned almost as an afterthought to their booth. "Everything all right over here?" she asked, her voice soft, directed not at Aidan, but at Leo. Leo ducked his head, embarrassed. "It's fine," he mumbled. Hannah's eyes flickered to the scattered food. then back to Leo's trembling hands. She didn't offer pity. She offered a solution. "You know," she said, leaning in slightly, as if sharing a secret, "my little brother used to call mashed potatoes cloud mountains. He said the only way to eat them was to build a gravy river right through the middle. Makes it easier for the fork to get a good scoop." A small smile touched Leo's lips. "A gravy river." "The best kind," she confirmed. She glanced at Aidan. "If it's okay with you, sir." Aidan was momentarily speechless. He had expected a performance, but this felt genuine. He gave a curt, uncertain nod. With a practiced ease, Hannah picked up the gravy boat. She didn't take the fork from Leo or try to feed him. Instead, she guided his hand with her own, a light, steadying touch. "All right, Captain Leo, let's navigate this river." She helped him pour a small channel of gravy. Then she gently adjusted his grip on the fork. "Try scooping from the side of the riverbank," she instructed softly. "The gravy makes it stick." Leo tried. The fork still shook, but this time a small mound of potato, slick with gravy, stayed on. He brought it to his mouth, a look of pure triumph on his face. He swallowed, and then beamed first at Hannah, then at his father. It was the brightest, most unburdened smile Aidan had seen from his son in months. For the next few minutes, Hannah hovered nearby, ostensibly cleaning the adjacent table, but offering quiet words of encouragement to Leo. "Good one. You've got this. Perfect landing." From the corner of his eye, Aidan saw the diner's manager, a greasy man named Peterson, glaring at Hannah, tapping his watch impatiently. Another table was waiting to be served, but Hannah seemed to exist in a bubble with Leo, her entire focus on helping this one child conquer his meal. Finally, with most of the food gone and Leo's confidence soaring, she gave him a final warm smile. "See you're a pro." She straightened up and turned to Aidan. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" Aidan Gallagher, the man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, could only shake his head, his throat tight. He watched her walk away, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions churning inside him. His cynicism was at war with a profound sense of gratitude. He saw the manager intercept her, hissing something in her ear that made her shoulders slump. Aidan felt a surge of protective anger. He looked at Leo, who was now happily finishing his meal, his earlier frustration completely forgotten. The boy hadn't just been fed. He'd been given a piece of his dignity back. And it was all because of a waitress in a cheap diner, a woman who had seen a child, not a disability or a photo opportunity. Aidan knew with a certainty that unnerved him that this couldn't be the end of it. He just didn't know what the next step was. The gears in Aidan's mind, always turning, began to spin in their old familiar grooves of suspicion. The initial wave of gratitude was quickly eroded by years of cultivated distrust. It was too perfect, a cynical voice whispered in his head. She saw the car. She recognized you. This was an act, a brilliant one, but an act nonetheless. The world he inhabited was filled with people who wanted something. His wealth was a magnet for sycophants, schemers, and gold diggers. He'd seen every trick heard, every sob story. He'd learned the hard way to build walls to test everyone, to assume a motive until proven otherwise. This Hannah Reed, with her perfectly timed kindness and her disarming smile, could be the most skilled actress he'd ever met. He watched as her manager Peterson berated her near the kitchen doors. Her face was turned away, but he could see the tension in her posture, the way her hands nervously wiped themselves on her apron. She was probably being reprimanded for spending too much time with them. A part of him, the part that had seen his son's smile, wanted to stride over there and put the fear of God into the man. But the other more dominant part, The cautious, calculating CEO held him back. This was part of the test. When Hannah returned with the check, her earlier warmth was gone, replaced by a professional, weary politeness. The light in her eyes had dimmed. "I hope everything was to your satisfaction," she said, her voice flat, as she placed the bill on the table. Aidan looked at her, searching for a sign, a flicker of avarice in her eyes. He saw only fatigue. "It was fine," he said, the word feeling like ash in his mouth. He reached for his wallet, a custom-made leather piece worth more than her monthly salary. The bill was $27.50. A normal person in his position, moved by her actions, might leave $100, $500, maybe even $1,000. It would be a grand gesture, a story she could tell for years. And that's exactly what she was expecting. His cynical side screamed, so he did the opposite. He performed a cold, calculated act of cruelty, designed to reveal her true intentions. He pulled out two $20 bills and placed them in the folder. A tip of $12.50. Generous by diner standards, but an insult considering the circumstances and who he was. If she was a genuine person, she'd be disappointed, but would move on. If she was an actress, her frustration, her anger at being so poorly compensated for her performance might show. He watched her as she picked it up. She opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. For a fleeting second, he saw something in her expression. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse, a deep, profound hurt. Her face paled, and her shoulders, which had already slumped after her manager's tirade, seemed to collapse entirely. She looked up, not at him, but through him, as if he had confirmed a terrible truth she had suspected about the world. Without a word, she turned and walked away. The guilt was immediate and suffocating. He had wanted a reaction, and he had gotten one, just not the one he expected. He hadn't exposed a schemer. He had wounded a kind spirit. "Dad, can we go?" Leo asked, oblivious to the silent drama that had just unfolded. "Yes, son, let's go," Aidan said, his voice hoarse. As they walked towards the door, he glanced back. Hannah was standing by the register, her back to him, talking to Mr. Peterson. The manager had a smug, triumphant look on his face. He was pointing a fat finger toward the door, his voice a low, angry buzz. And then Aidan heard the words that would haunt him for days to come. "I told you Reed wasting time on gawkers. He left you $12, 12. You're fired. Get your things and get out." Hannah flinched as if struck. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She just nodded, a single defeated gesture. She slowly untied her apron, laid it on the counter, and walked towards the employee locker room without a backward glance. Aidan froze his hand on the door. He had done this. His petty, cynical test had cost this woman her job. He had taken her singular act of compassion and used it as a weapon against her. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He should go back. He should fix this. He should tear Peterson apart, limb from limb, and offer Hannah 1,000 apologies. But Leo was tugging on his hand, eager to leave the stuffy diner. The other patrons were starting to stare again. The CEO, the man of action, was paralyzed by a sudden and unfamiliar surge of self-loathing. He pushed the door open and fled into the afternoon sun. The image of Hannah's defeated posture burned into his memory. The drive back to his sterile, empty mansion was silent. The triumphant smile long gone from Leo's face, replaced by a quiet confusion that only amplified Aidan's guilt. He had set out to test a stranger's character, and had ended up revealing the ugly, corroded nature of his own. The silence in the Bentley was heavier than the car's bulletproof armor. Leo, usually chatty after an outing, stared out the window, his small face unreadable. The joy from the diner had evaporated. leaving a strange tension in its wake. Back in the sprawling minimalist mansion that felt more like a modern art museum than a home, the silence grew even louder. Mrs. Gable, the kind but formal housekeeper, took Leo for his afternoon physical therapy session, leaving Aidan alone in his cavernous office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a meticulously manicured garden, a perfect, sterile landscape that suddenly felt like a reflection of his own soul. He couldn't shake the image of Hannah's face when she saw the tip. The flicker of pain. He had engineered it, and it had worked perfectly, revealing not her greed, but his own cruelty. And then the manager's words echoed in his ears, "You're fired." He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid doing nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in his bones. He was a man who prided himself on data, on making calculated decisions based on evidence. What had been the evidence here? That a young woman had shown his son a moment of pure, unadulterated kindness, and his conclusion? It had to be a scam. "Dad." Aidan turned. Leo was standing in the doorway, leaning on his walker. His therapy sessions always left him tired, but his eyes were bright and alert. "Hey, buddy, how was therapy?" Aidan asked, forcing a smile. "It was okay. Mrs. Gable is nice." Leo said, his gaze distant. He paused, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind for hours. Was that lady at the diner mad at us? The question was a direct hit, bypassing all of Aidan's defenses. "No, Leo. Of course not. Why would you think that because you got quiet and she looked sad when she left?" Leo said with the simple, brutal honesty of a child. "I liked her. She helped me. She didn't look at me funny. She didn't look at me funny." The words twisted in Aidan's gut. In his paranoid effort to protect his fortune, he had punished the one person who had seen his son as just a boy who needed a little help. He had validated every fear Leo had about being different, about being a burden. "She wasn't sad because of us, Leo." Aidan lied the falsehood tasting sour. "It was just a busy day at the diner." But Leo was too smart for that. "Okay," he said, clearly unconvinced. He turned to leave, then stopped. "I wish we could thank her for the Gravy River." After Leo had gone, Aidan sank into his chair, the weight of his son's simple wish pressing down on him. Thank her. He had done the opposite. He had gotten her fired for what, a $12 tip and a mountain of misplaced suspicion. The regret was no longer a quiet hum. It was a roaring inferno. For 3 years since Catherine's death, he had operated on pure defense, protecting Leo, protecting their privacy, protecting his heart. But in doing so, he had become a fortress with no gates, letting no one in, and in the process locking himself and Leo inside. Hannah, with her simple gesture, had found a crack in the wall, and he had blasted it shut with a cannon of cold, hard cash. Enough. He picked up his phone, his fingers flying across the secure keypad. He dialed a number he hadn't used in over a year. "Miller." A gravelly voice answered on the first ring. Frank Miller was a private investigator, the best in the business. He was discreet, efficient, and expensive. Aidan had used him in the past for corporate espionage and vetting high-level employees. Using him for a personal matter felt strange, almost desperate. "Frank, it's Aidan Gallagher." "Aidan, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Someone trying to steal your new quantum computing patent." Frank's voice was dry, devoid of pleasantries. "No, it's something else. Personal," Aidan said, pacing the length of his office. "I need you to find someone. A waitress. Her name is Hannah Reed. She was working at a diner called The Corner Booth on Lexington Avenue. As of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, she's no longer employed there." There was a brief silence on the other end. Frank was likely surprised by the mundane nature of the request. Hannah Reid, corner booth, fired today. You want a full background check. Surveillance. No, Aidan said quickly, a fresh wave of shame washing over him. No, just find her. I need an address, a phone number. I need to know her situation. Is she in trouble? Does she have family? I need to know everything, Frank, and I need it yesterday. Her situation? Frank asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. I may be responsible for her losing her job. Aidan admitted the confession, feeling heavy and inadequate. I need to make it right. Frank Miller, a man who had seen the worst of human nature, was silent for a moment longer. Got it, he finally said. I'll have something for you by morning. Aidan hung up the phone, but the sense of urgency didn't abate. He stared out at the perfect garden again. For the first time, he didn't see order and control. He saw a lonely, manicured cage. He had to find Hannah Reid. It was no longer just about assuaging his guilt. It was about proving to his son and to himself that a moment of genuine human connection was worth more than all the money in the world, and that the man who had run from it was not the man he was destined to be. The search was on not just for a waitress, but for a piece of his own lost humanity. The file Frank Miller delivered the next morning was thin, but its contents were heavy. It lay on Aidan's polished mahogany desk, a stark manila folder in a world of sleek black technology. He opened it with a sense of dread. Hannah Reid's life was laid out in crisp bulleted points. 24 years old, an orphan raised by her grandmother, who had passed away 2 years prior from cancer. She was a third-year nursing student at a city college, holding down 2 jobs to pay for tuition, and rent, the diner, was just one of them. She lived in a cramped, run-down apartment in a neighborhood Aidan's driver usually avoided. The final page of the report was a gut punch, a copy of an eviction notice taped to her door just last week. She was 3 months behind on rent. The diner job was likely the only thing keeping her afloat. The guilt Aidan felt morphed into a cold, hard resolve. He hadn't just knocked her down. He had kicked out the last pillar supporting her entire life. Frank had included her address and phone number. For an hour, Aidan stared at the number, composing and deleting texts, rehearsing phone calls in his head. But this wasn't a conversation for the phone. This required him to face her, to look into the eyes of the person he had so casually wronged. He told his driver to take the day off. He drove himself, taking not the Bentley, but a nondescript black sedan from his collection. The building was even more dilapidated than he'd imagined. The air in the hallway smelled of damp and desperation. He found her apartment 4B and saw the faint outline where the eviction notice had been taped. He raised his hand to knock his heart pounding with an anxiety he usually only felt before a multi-billion-dollar merger. The door opened, and there she was. Hannah looked smaller, more fragile than she had in the diner. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and she was wearing a threadbare college sweatshirt. When she saw him, her expression shifted from weary confusion to stunned disbelief, then quickly hardened into a mask of wary resignation. "Mr. Gallagher," she said, her voice hoarse. "If you're here to complain about the service, you're a little late." I was fired. "I know," Aidan said, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "That's why I'm here. Ms. Reid." "Hannah, may I come in for a moment?" She hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorknob. She looked as if she was about to slam the door in his face, and he couldn't blame her. But then a deep sigh escaped her, a sound of utter defeat, and she stepped back, letting him into the tiny, sparsely furnished apartment. It was clean and tidy, but bare. A stack of nursing textbooks sat on a wobbly coffee table, and a framed photo of her with an elderly woman was the only personal touch. "Look," she said, crossing her arms, not bothering to offer him a seat. "I don't know why you're here. If you think I'm going to sue you or the diner, don't worry. I don't have the time or the money. I just need to figure out how to pack up my entire life before the end of the month." "I came here to apologize," Aidan said the words, feeling clumsy and insufficient. "What I did at the diner yesterday was inexcusable. I was cynical, I was wrong, and my actions had consequences for you that I never intended. I am deeply, truly sorry." Hannah just stared at him, her expression unyielding. An apology wasn't going to pay her rent. "My son Leo." Aidan continued, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. "He has challenges. People often react in two ways. They stare with pity, or they try to exploit the situation for my benefit. I've become conditioned to expect the worst. What you did for him was the kindest, most intuitive thing I have seen in years, and I mistook it for a performance. It was a failing on my part, not yours." A flicker of something understanding, perhaps, softened her gaze. "Your son," she said quietly. "He's a sweet kid. He just needed a little help." "He needed more than help," Aidan countered. "He needed someone to see him. And you did. That's a gift I repaid with an insult. I found out about your job and about this." He gestured vaguely around the room, indicating her predicament. "I am here to make it right." He expected her to be relieved, maybe even grateful. Instead, her suspicion returned full force. "Make it right? How by giving me $1,000 tip a day late?" "No thank you, Mr. Gallagher. My dignity isn't for sale." He was taken aback by her fire, her pride. He respected it. "This isn't about charity," he said, shifting his strategy. "This is a proposition, a job offer. I read your file. I found out you're a nursing student." He cringed at his slip-up. "You have a natural gift for caregiving. My son has a team of the best doctors and therapists money can buy, but he doesn't have a companion. Someone who can help him navigate the small things, the gravy rivers of life. Someone who won't treat him like a patient or a project." He took a breath, laying his cards on the table. "I want to hire you, Miss Reed, to be Leo's private caregiver and companion. The salary would be substantial, more than enough to handle your financial issues. But more than that, I would cover your full tuition, any student debt you currently have, and provide you with a place to live. You could finish your degree without the stress of working 2 jobs. You could focus on your studies and on helping my son." Hannah was speechless. She stared at him as if he'd just started speaking a foreign language. Her mind was clearly racing, trying to find the hidden clause in this unbelievable offer. "You would pay for my entire nursing degree," she whispered the words barely audible, "and provide a generous salary. Your responsibilities would be to assist Leo with daily tasks, accompany him to therapy sessions, help with his schoolwork, and just be his friend. You would have weekends off, full benefits. It's a real job, Hannah, a demanding one. But I can't think of anyone more qualified." Tears welled up in her eyes, tears of shock and overwhelming relief. She sank onto the edge of her worn-out sofa, burying her face in her hands. He had expected anger or suspicion, but he was met with the raw, heart-wrenching sound of a dam breaking. All the stress, the fear of eviction, the sleepless nights spent worrying about tuition, it all came pouring out. Aidan stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, feeling both like a savior and a fool. He had caused this pain, and now he was offering the cure. He waited patiently for her to compose herself. Finally she looked up, her face tear-streaked, but her eyes clear. "Why?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why do all this for me?" Aidan thought of his son's face, beaming with pride over a forkful of mashed potatoes. "Because my son asked me to thank you," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "And because for the first time in a very long time, someone showed him that his disability doesn't define him. You have no idea what that's worth to me." "So what do you say?" Hannah looked from Aidan's earnest face to the photo of her and her grandmother on the table. She had gone into nursing to help people inspired by the compassionate nurses who had cared for her grandmother in her final days. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to do exactly what she was meant to do, a lifeline thrown to her in her darkest hour. She took a deep, shuddering breath and nodded. "Yes," she said, a watery smile finally breaking through. "Yes, Mr. Gallagher, I accept." Stepping into Aidan Gallagher's mansion was like entering a different dimension. The rundown apartment building, with its lingering scent of damp, was replaced by the clean, almost sterile smell of polished marble and fresh flowers. Sunlight streamed through vast panes of glass, illuminating a world of muted colors, modern art, and unnerving silence. It was beautiful, but it felt cold, more a corporate headquarters than a home. Hannah's new life began with a whirlwind of formalities. Contracts were signed, a background check she knew she would pass was completed, and she was shown to her living quarters, a suite of rooms larger than her entire previous apartment, with a stunning view of the city skyline. It was overwhelming. But the moment she saw Leo again, the opulence and intimidation faded away. The boy was waiting for her in the family library, a room with towering shelves of books. He looked small against the grand backdrop, but his face lit up when he saw her. "The Gravy River lady," he exclaimed, a genuine, uninhibited smile spreading across his face. "That's me." Hannah laughed, her own anxieties melting away. "But you can call me Hannah." Their bond was immediate and natural. Hannah's nursing training gave her the practical skills to assist Leo with his physical needs. But her true gift was her ability to connect with him on a human level. She didn't just help him with his exercises. She turned them into games, into superhero training. She didn't just help him with his homework. She discovered his passion for astronomy and spent hours with him creating a detailed map of the solar system on his bedroom ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. For the first time, laughter echoed in the silent halls of the Gallagher mansion. Aidan would often find himself pausing outside the library or the therapy room, listening to the sound of his son's joyful chatter and Hannah's patient, encouraging responses. He saw a change in Leo that millions of dollars in therapy had never achieved. The boy was more confident, more outgoing, less frustrated with his limitations. Hannah had brought warmth and light into their cold, orderly world. Aidan found himself changing, too. He started leaving the office earlier, making a point to be home for dinner. He and Hannah would discuss Leo's progress, their conversations professional at first, but gradually becoming more personal. He learned about her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse, about the grandmother who had raised her, about her simple joys and quiet fears. He found himself looking forward to these conversations, to her grounded perspective and easy smile. The fortress around his heart began to show more cracks, but not everyone was pleased with this new arrangement. The challenge arrived in the form of a woman named Brenda Catherine's younger sister. Brenda visited every few weeks ostensibly to see her nephew, but her visits were more like inspections. She was a perfectly coiffed woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, who saw herself as the guardian of her late sister's memory and legacy. And she saw Hannah as an intruder. From their very first meeting, Brenda made her disapproval clear. "So you're the new help," Brenda said, her eyes sweeping over Hannah's simple attire with disdain. "I'm Leo's companion and caregiver," Hannah replied politely, refusing to be intimidated. "How lovely," Brenda said, her tone anything but. Aidan has always been so impulsive when it comes to Leo. It's a miracle you were qualified coming from that greasy diner. Brenda's attacks were never direct enough for Hannah to report to Aidan without sounding petty. They were subtle, insidious digs designed to undermine her. She would reorganize Leo's medical supplies, creating confusion for Hannah. She would question Hannah's judgment in front of Leo, asking, "Are you sure that's what the doctor recommended? My sister Catherine would have done it differently." She would talk loudly on the phone to friends just within Hannah's earshot about how impressionable wealthy widowers are and how scheming young women can take advantage of a family's grief. Hannah did her best to ignore it, focusing on Leo. But Brenda's constant scrutiny was like a persistent low-grade fever, making her feel unwelcome and on edge. She knew Brenda was trying to plant seeds of doubt in Aidan's mind, to paint her as an unqualified, opportunistic interloper. The situation came to a head one afternoon. Aidan had an important investor meeting that had been moved to the mansion. The atmosphere was tense. Brenda was also visiting, wandering the house with an air of proprietary authority. Hannah had just finished a session with Leo and was preparing his mid-afternoon snack in the kitchen when Brenda cornered her. "You know," Brenda began, inspecting her nails, "this is all very cozy for you, isn't it? From a tenement to a palace, you played your cards beautifully." "I'm here to do a job, Brenda," Hannah said, her patience wearing thin. "I care about Leo." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Brenda purred. "You care about everything that comes with him, but I want you to understand something. This is Catherine's house. This is Catherine's son. You are a temporary fixture. Don't get too comfortable." Before Hannah could respond, Brenda's eyes darted towards the hallway where Aidan was approaching with a group of serious-looking investors. A cruel, calculating smile played on Brenda's lips. As Aidan's group passed the kitchen entrance, Brenda suddenly raised her voice, her tone shifting to one of saccharine concern. "Oh, Hannah dear, please be more careful," she exclaimed purposefully, knocking a glass of water off the counter, which shattered on the floor near Hannah's feet. "Aidan's guests are here. We can't have you being so clumsy. You must be terribly overwhelmed by all this." Aidan and his investors stopped turning to look at the scene. Hannah stood frozen, surrounded by shattered glass, while Brenda looked on with an expression of feigned pity. To the outsiders it looked exactly as Brenda intended, the clumsy, out-of-her-depth new hire making a mess at the worst possible moment. Aidan's face was unreadable. He excused himself from his guests and walked into the kitchen. Hannah's heart sank. Brenda's poison was working. The old suspicion she had seen in Aidan's eyes at the diner was back, if only for a second. The new world she had just begun to build felt as fragile as the glass shattered at her feet. Aidan's expression was a cold, impenetrable mask. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low and tight, sending a chill down Hannah's spine. Before Hannah could speak, Brenda swooped in, playing the role of the gracious hostess, dealing with a minor inconvenience. "Oh, it's nothing, Aidan. Just a little accident. Poor Hannah is probably just a bit flustered with all the commotion. I'll have the staff clean it up." She placed a hand on Hannah's arm, a gesture that looked supportive, but felt like a vice. "Don't you worry about a thing, dear." Hannah looked at Aidan, her throat too tight to form words. She wanted to scream. She did it on purpose, but how could she? It would sound like a hysterical accusation from a resentful employee. She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes as he looked from his sister-in-law to her. He was a man conditioned to see patterns and motives, and Brenda was presenting a simple, plausible one. The hired help was out of her element. I'll get the dustpan." Hannah mumbled, her face burning with humiliation. Aidan simply nodded, his face grim, and returned to his guests. The incident passed, but the air in the mansion had changed. A wall had gone up between her and Aidan. Their easy evening conversations became stilted and professional again. He was watching her, vetting her, just as he had on that first day. Brenda's campaign of psychological warfare was succeeding. Knowing she was on precarious ground, Brenda decided it was time to spring her final, most vicious trap. A week later, Brenda arrived for an unannounced visit, bearing gifts for Leo. Among them was a new state-of-the-art tablet. While Hannah was helping Leo unbox it, Brenda casually mentioned that Catherine had left behind a small private safe in the master bedroom suite, a place where she kept a few pieces of sentimental jewelry, nothing of immense monetary value, but of infinite personal worth to the family. "Aidan keeps the key in his desk drawer," Brenda said, her tone light and airy. "It's not very secure, I keep telling him, especially with new staff around." She shot a pointed look at Hannah. Hannah ignored the jibe. She didn't care about jewelry or safes. Her focus was on Leo, who was already engrossed in his new device. Later that afternoon, Aidan received an urgent call and had to leave for his office unexpectedly. Brenda offered to stay with Leo until he returned. A few hours later, Hannah received a text from Aidan. "Have to go to Zurich. Emergency board meeting. Back in 2 days. Brenda will stay over. Make sure Leo is okay." Hannah's stomach twisted. 2 days alone in the house with Brenda felt like a prison sentence. The next evening, the trap was sprung. Hannah was in her room studying for a major exam when she heard a piercing shriek from the master wing of the house. She rushed out to find Brenda in the hallway, looking distraught, with Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, trying to calm her. "It's gone," Brenda cried, her voice trembling with manufactured hysteria. "Catherine's necklace, the one our mother gave her. It's gone." Aidan, having just returned a day early, appeared at the end of the hall, his face etched with exhaustion from his trip. "Brenda, what's going on? The safe is open. Aidan." Brenda sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at the open door of the master bedroom. "I just wanted to look at her things, and the necklace is gone. The key was right where you left it." She turned her tear-filled, accusatory eyes directly on Hannah. She was the only one here, the only one who knew where the key was. "I told her about it yesterday." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Mrs. Gable looked shocked, her gaze darting nervously between Hannah and Brenda. All eyes fell on Hannah. It was a perfect setup. The new poor employee given access to a world of wealth, succumbing to temptation. It was the story Aidan had already written in his head at the diner. Hannah felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I would never. I didn't." Aidan looked at her, his face a thundercloud of conflicting emotions. He saw his distraught sister-in-law, a woman he had known for 15 years. He saw his loyal, long-time housekeeper, looking utterly bewildered. And he saw the young woman he had brought into his home, the woman his gut had initially told him not to trust. "Hannah," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "my office has security cameras. We will review the footage. If you took the necklace, you have one chance to give it back right now, and I will not press charges." Tears of disbelief and hurt streamed down Hannah's face. "You think I did this after everything?" "I don't know what to think," he shot back, his frustration boiling over. "Brenda, Mrs. Gable wait in the library. Hannah, you stay here." As they left, Aidan strode past Hannah into his office. She stood alone in the hallway, her world crumbling. This was it. This was how it ended, with a false accusation and the return of his unwavering suspicion. A minute later, he reappeared, his face pale, his expression unreadable. He was holding a small velvet box. "Is this the necklace?" he asked Brenda, who had reappeared in the doorway, her face a mask of triumphant grief. Brenda gasped. "Yes. Where did you find it?" "I found it," Aidan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "in the side pocket of your designer handbag which you left in the library." Brenda's face went white. "What? That's impossible. She must have planted it there." "No." Aidan said, his eyes now blazing with a cold fury Hannah had never seen before. "Because the security cameras in my office were not the only ones I was watching. The tablet I bought Leo last week, the gift from you. It has parental monitoring software. It records audio and video. It was in Leo's room last night when you went in to tuck him in." He held up his phone and pressed play. Brenda's voice, clear as a bell, filled the silent hallway. It was a recording of a phone call she had made. "The trap is set." Brenda's recorded voice cooed. "The little tramp will be gone by tomorrow. Aidan will finally see she's just a gold digger from the gutter. Then we can get things back to the way they were supposed to be." The color drained completely from Brenda's face. She stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Aidan took a step towards her, his voice low and menacing. "Catherine was my wife. She was your sister. And you used her memory, her most precious belongings, to frame an innocent woman and manipulate my son. All because you couldn't stand to see someone else bring light back into this house." He paused, his jaw clenched. "Get out!" he snarled. "Get out of my house, and do not ever contact me or my son again. We're done." Brenda stumbled backward, speechless. She gave Hannah one last look of pure hatred before turning and practically fleeing down the hallway. The silence that followed was deafening. Hannah was still crying, but now they were tears of shock and vindication. Aidan turned to her, his own face a portrait of shame and regret. "Hannah," he started, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. I doubted you. Even for a second, I doubted you. I fell back into my old ways." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "It was Leo," he said softly. "When Brenda was accusing you, he came to me. He told me he heard Aunt Brenda on the phone last night, saying she was going to get rid of the Gravy River lady. He's the one who told me to check the tablet's recordings. He trusted you even when I was about to fail you." Aidan reached out hesitantly and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Can you forgive me?" Hannah looked into his eyes, seeing not the powerful billionaire, but a man who was flawed guarded and trying his best to heal. She thought of Leo, the brave little boy who had been her champion. And she knew that this house, with these two people, was the closest thing to a family she'd had in a very long time. She nodded, a fresh wave of tears falling. "There's nothing to forgive." In that moment, the last of Aidan's walls came crashing down, and the foundation for something new, something built not on suspicion or gratitude, but on trust and genuine affection, was finally laid. 3 years can change everything. The Gallagher mansion, once a silent monument to grief and wealth, was now a home. The echoes of a child's laughter were more common than the polished gleam of the marble floors. The sterile perfect gardens now featured a slightly lopsided treehouse, a joint project between Aidan Hannah and a very enthusiastic Leo who acted as chief architect. Hannah Reed was no longer just the help. She was Hannah, and she was family. She had graduated at the top of her class, her nursing degree framed, and hung proudly in her old suite, which she now used more as a study. She had long since moved into a room in the main family wing, a move prompted not by Aidan, but by a 13-year-old Leo, who had declared it illogical for her to be so far away. She had passed her board exams with flying colors and now worked part-time as a pediatric nurse at the city's top children's hospital in a new wing funded by an anonymous donation from Ether Dynamics. But she always structured her schedule to be home when Leo got back from school. Her role had evolved from caregiver to mentor confidant and an unshakable pillar in his life. Under her care and encouragement, Leo had blossomed. While his physical challenges remained, his spirit was boundless. He was excelling in his studies, had developed a wicked sense of humor, and faced the world with a confidence that Aidan had once only dreamed of for him. The relationship between Hannah and Aidan had undergone its own quiet, profound transformation. The employer-employee dynamic had dissolved the day Brenda was exposed, replaced by a deep, trusting friendship. That friendship had over time blossomed into something more. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow, gentle burn built on shared evenings, discussing their day's mutual respect, and a shared, fierce love for Leo. It started with small things, Aidan bringing her a coffee just the way she liked it, after a long nursing shift. Hannah leaving a book on his desk she thought he'd enjoy. It grew into shared dinners after Leo was in bed, talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding the parts of themselves they had both thought were lost forever. One cool autumn evening, they were sitting on the patio, watching Leo use a high-powered telescope, Aidan's latest gift, to map the constellations. "Look," Leo shouted, his voice filled with wonder. "You can see the rings of Saturn?" Hannah smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that still made Aidan's breath catch. "He's amazing," she said softly. "We're amazing," Aidan corrected her, turning to face her. He took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. His touch was no longer hesitant, but familiar and comforting. "You brought him back to me, Hannah. You brought me back." "We did it together," she replied, her fingers lacing with his. The cynicism that had once defined Aidan Gallagher was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound gratitude. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or market caps, but in moments like these. The value of one person's kindness, offered without expectation of reward in a greasy spoon, Dinah had paid dividends beyond his wildest imagination. It had not only changed Hannah's life forever, freeing her from debt and allowing her to pursue her dreams, but it had saved his. It had saved his son. It had given them a future he had been too blind to see. He looked at Hannah, her eyes reflecting the twilight sky, and then at his son, who was chattering excitedly about distant galaxies. His world was no longer a cold, lonely fortress. It was a home filled with warmth, laughter, and a love he never thought he would feel again. "Hannah," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Catherine told me once that the stars only shined so brightly because of the darkness. My life was very dark for a long time." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for being my star." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a perfect fit. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son explore the universe. Two souls from different worlds who had found their own constellation right here on Earth. The journey had started with a simple act of kindness to a disabled boy, but it had ended with the creation of a brand new family, stronger and brighter than any of them could have ever hoped for. The story of Aidan, Leo, and Hannah reminds us that the most profound changes in our lives often begin with the smallest, most unexpected gestures. It shows us how a single moment of genuine compassion, seeing a person instead of their circumstances, can ripple outward, shattering walls of cynicism, healing old wounds, and building a future brighter than anyone could have imagined. Their journey wasn't just about a billionaire helping a waitress. It was about 3 people finding their way back to hope and creating a family, proving that the richest person in the world isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love to give. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the power of kindness, please let us know in the comments below. We share inspiring stories like this every week to bring a little more light into the world. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that celebrates the very best of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.